All right, we are recording and live.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the virtual meeting of the Newburyport Historical Commission this Thursday, the 13th of January, 2022. Happy New Year. We'll do a roll call in just a minute because I am waiting for one more attendee to join just momentarily. We expect one more to join. The rest of us are here. We do have a quorum. Let me double check that. Yes, we do. So I'll start with my preamble because we have a very big agenda. So I want to keep things moving along. Per standard, those of you who've been with these before, this is not news. Only commissioners will have the audio enabled, except one member of the public at a time. During public hearings, periods will be unmuted, and of course, applicants and their representatives will be unmuted during their presentations at any other appropriate times that they need to speak. Now, if you wish to speak during a public comment period, you must raise your hand so we know you wish to do that, and you use the controls in the Zoom application to do that. If you're using a telephone, it's *9 to raise or lower your hand, and that's *6 to mute and unmute. And you will, once we recognize you, will unmute you on our end. You need to unmute yourself on your end as well for us to hear you. So that is for that. And please, as in any public meeting, identify yourself with your name and address when you speak. And we ask that public comments be, brief, as again, we do have a very busy night ahead. Any sign of our pal Carnwath, Caitlin?
Hi there, not yet.
Okay. Well, I'm going to do a roll call of the folks that are here. I'll start off with that. So we have Mr. Fay, Christopher Fay.
I'm here.
Okay. Peter McNamee.
Present.
Okay. Joe Morgan.
Here.
Okay, thank you. And the chair, Glenn Richards, is here. I'm expecting Malcolm Carnwath. He did say he would be attending, so hopefully he'll be joining shortly. So on tonight's agenda, there are a total of 4 demolition delay applications. So what I'm going to do is very briefly explain the process so everyone's clear on it. I'll do it once, and because it's the same for all 4. The Newburyport ordinance spell out the circumstances under which the demolition plans have to be reviewed by the Historical Commission. The zoning administrator reviews the applications to make that determination, and that's how these 4 applications on tonight's agenda got here. So the commission, that's us, must first determine into which of 3 categories a structure falls, either not historically significant and considered for preservation, or historically significant but not considered for preservation. If and only if that determination is that it's significant and considered for preservation, then we go on to hold a public hearing to review the proposed demolition plan. And that used to require 2 meetings, but the planning office now provides legal notice for these meetings so that we can hold that hearing at the same meeting. So I expect that will probably be happening tonight. So at the conclusion of the demolition plan review, there's a vote on whether the structure is, quote, preferably preserved or not. If it is, that is, we decide that the structure is historically significant and preferably preserved. That means a 1-year demolition delay is imposed at that point. However, if upon the review of the plans, which we've been in the process of doing, we approve them or we have no problem with them, that is, we judge them not to have an adverse impact on the historical values, then we can go ahead and approve those plans and lift the demolition delay. So with that, we'll get started. And in light of the agenda, I respectfully request that applicants and their representatives try to be brief. The first item is 33 Lafayette Street. That's up by the hospital. I believe that will be Attorney Lisa Mead speaking, and I think the architect Scott Brown may be here as well. So Caitlin, are they, and I should point out before we actually start that Malcolm Carnwath. Malcolm, can you just check your audio? I say you've joined. Can we verify that you're here and able to speak?
Yes.
Okay,
how's
great. Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Great.
Malcolm. Okay, so everyone's here. So are you with us, Attorney Mead?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and the only thing I ask Attorney Mead is, and you're familiar with this, I know, is that since at first we'll mainly, there'll be the vote on the historical significance. So, focus on that briefly, and then we'll take that vote, and then we'll move on to your more, full exposition of your plans, okay?
Certainly, I certainly will do that. So for the record, Lisa Mead Teller Costa, 30 Green Street in Newburyport. And with me this evening is Scott Brown, who's the architect on the project, as well as Jonathan and Lindsay Green, who are the owners of this house. This property, if you can go to the next slide, please, Caitlin. The property is located at 33 Lafayette Street, and as the chair indicated, it's up by the hospital. In fact, it's at the corner of Lafayette and Highland. It's located in the R2 zoning district and was constructed around 1920, according to the assessor's records. There is no Form B, nor is it listed on the district data sheets. If you could go to the next slide, please, Caitlin. So here is the 1914 Sanborn Map. I think you can look at towards the bottom of it, you'll see a yellow dot on Highland Avenue across from the hospital. That is the location of this structure, which doesn't exist, as you can see, in 1914. Next slide. However, in 1924, the assessor's map does show this structure on this lot. And you will actually, if you were to zoom in a little bit, you can actually see the bump out on the edge next to Highland Avenue. And that, in fact, is the location of where this addition is proposed to go. Next slide, please. And just for reference sake, here is today's assessor's map. And you can see the structures around the house as well as the hospital. And the house footprint remains today the same as it did in 1924. Next slide, please. And so here's a street view of the house from Lafayette Street. Next slide. And here is the corner of Lafayette and Highland. And next slide, please. And here is from Highland. This is the end where the proposed addition is to be built upon top of the first floor structure. Next slide, please. And here's a little further down, driving down Highland to the east. Next slide, please. And this is a little further away. This is from the hospital parking lot. And next slide, please. So we would request the commission make a determination of historic significance and whether or not this project should be preferably preserved. I think that's for you then, Mr. Chair. Maybe
Yeah,
you're muted.
yeah, sorry. Yep.
You know it.
Yep, I had to unmute myself. Yep.
That's okay.
Thank you. So thank you, Attorney Mead. My colleagues on the board, anyone have a comment as to their opinions as to the historical significance and consideration of preservation of this particular structure? Certainly not seeing any hands. Would the chair hear a motion if someone has one? The motion should either be that, well, it's one of those three options, that it's historically significant and considered for preservation, it's not historically significant, or it's historically significant but not considered for preservation. That last one is usually when a structure is in such is historically significant but in very poor condition, and is, you know, not really a candidate for preservation. But so is there someone willing to make a motion so we can move along and have a vote on that?
Yes, this is Joe Morgan. I move that 33 Lafayette Street be considered historically significant and considered for preservation.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Is that seconded?
This is Peter. I'll second.
Okay, so the motion is that it is historically significant and considered for preservation. Make a note here. So I'll go around our commissioners. Malcolm Carnwath.
I agree.
Okay, that's a yes. Christopher Fay.
Yes.
Okay, Peter McNamee.
Yes.
Okay, Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Okay, and the chair agrees. Okay, so it's deemed historically significant and considered for preservation. So we move to a review of the demolition plans. Now, Attorney Mead, it always seemed a little, I don't know of the best time to have the public comment period, but it seemed that the pattern seems to be to do it first and then move on to presentations and deliberations. So I'll go ahead and do that. I don't, we'll see if, I don't expect a lot of public comment on this, but nonetheless, I will officially open a public comment period. So if you are an attendee and wish to comment on this particular project, please indicate so by raising your hand so we know that you wish to do that. And we'll allow several seconds for that to happen. Can't see anyone, not seeing any hands raised. Another a couple seconds. Looks like no. Okay, then I will close the public comment period. I'll make a note here. And we can, Attorney Mead, if you would like to present your demolition plan, and we'll proceed with that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So if you go to the next slide, please, Caitlin. So the proposal, as I pointed out in the original review, is to construct an addition over that bump out for a second story, which would constitute, of course, a roof line change. As I mentioned also earlier, the addition is within the existing footprint. With that, what I'll do is go to the next slide. And you can see here's the site plan, Highland Avenue at the top, the hospital's on the other side of that, then Lafayette Street, and you can see that bump out in this footprint. And thank you. None of this footprint changes. So with that, what I'm going to do is turn it over to Scott Brown to review the plans for you.
Thank you, Attorney Mead. Scott Brown, the architect for the project. If we could just quickly go to slide 15 and skip over the existing elevations. So these are the proposed elevations for the project. At the bottom is the front elevation as you would see it from Lafayette Street, and at the top is the proposed elevation as you would see it from Highland. And so what we have here is a classic early 20th century house with some craftsman-like flavor to it. It is a 4-bedroom, 1 full bathroom house for a family with 3 children. This project is about providing an additional bathroom, a closet for the primary bedroom, as well as a first floor powder room. It is a small house and we can't accomplish those goals within the existing footprint. And the only place where it makes sense to expand is out over this existing bump out on the right side of the house. So we have in the past designed some additions with the intention of making them look like they've always been there. But with this particular project, we've taken the opposite approach and made the design somewhat separate from the rest of the house. This direction is largely driven by what is happening beyond those exterior walls and the need for privacy, since it is a bedroom and a bathroom and a closet at the second floor, and at the first floor it is a powder room as well. So it's largely driven, by the need for privacy, and this has resulted in a smaller window type, and we've also decided to change up the siding and some of the trim details as well, further differentiating it from the rest of the house. So I think this is a modest request. It is a modest addition to a small house, and I think it's going to be very successful. And with that, providing that council has nothing further to add, I will hand it back to you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Brown. First, let me see if any commissioner has a question. If not, then I'll just kind of quickly go around the horn here. I think that technique has worked well. Just allowing each commissioner to make a comment, and if you don't have any, or someone else has already said it, then just indicate that. We can keep moving quickly. So kind of in no particular order, just how they're showing up on my screen here. Chris Fay, do you any thoughts or comments on this before we take a vote?
Nothing big. It's just I guess I'm always hesitant to see sort of modifications, but I understand the practicality of it, and the need for bathroom space, especially if there's only one bathroom in the house. So
right.
I don't have any major issues with it now.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. Joe Morgan, any thoughts or comments?
Yes, Chair, I have no comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. How about Peter? How about you?
No, I really don't have any comments on it.
Okay, and finally, Malcolm, thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I think I'm perfectly happy with this. I think we should give it a go.
Okay, thanks very much, Malcolm. Appreciate it. And yeah, I don't either. I think Scott put it well when he said it's a fairly modest change. I don't, and I the thing that I always look for is how is it going to affect historical values? Is it going to have an adverse impact? And I really don't see any significant one here. So if someone would like to go ahead and make a motion, well, first of all, again, I almost did it again. So the vote we have to have now is we said it was historically significant and considered for preservation. Hopefully I worded that right. So now the vote is that it's historically significant and preferably preserved. I think we all know that, and then we can go ahead and have a vote on the that we're okay with the plan and they can go ahead without the demolition delay. I hope that's clear. So let me make a note here. So the motion should be at this point that it's the structure is historically significant and preferably preserved. So since I've said that, does anyone want to say so moved?
I'll make that motion. Glenn, this is Peter.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
I'll
So-
second that.
Okay, thank you, Chris Fay. So Malcolm, your vote on that?
Yeah,
Yes. Okay, Christopher Fay.
Yes.
Okay, Peter.
Yes.
Okay, Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Okay, and the chair is yes. And I'll move right to the vote. It's preferably preserved, but we've reviewed the plans. It sounded like we're okay with the plans. So is there a motion to approve the plans and lift the demo delay?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Thank you.
Seconded by Joe.
Thank you, Malcolm and Joe. Again, Malcolm, your vote?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, vote is approval. Christopher Fay?
Yes.
Thank you. Peter?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And the chair agrees. So we are unanimous with that. So sure, Attorney Mead understands what that means. So the owner and applicant, you understand as well that the demolition delay was enforced for a matter of minutes, and you are your plans are approved for the go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let me finish making a couple of notes here. Okay, very good. Let's see if we can keep moving expeditiously. The next project is 68 Milk Street. And on this one, I believe the owners are here themselves. I don't have their name in front of me. Caitlin, perhaps you have it. And is it John Ramo?
It is.
Okay, that didn't sound like John though. But anyway, you're unmuted. So who's speaking?
Hi, this is John. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Great. Hello, everyone. As mentioned, my name is John Ramo. My wife and I recently purchased 68 Milk Street in November of 2021, and we're currently working on some internal renovations. So the home was built in 1850. At some point, it appears that a small first floor addition was added to the rear of the house. Unfortunately, I can't say for sure if the rear structure is part of the original home, as the city has no record, but the addition has its own separate foundation, which would suggest it was added after the fact. So if you scroll to the next picture, actually, just give you a different view of the bump out that we're referring to. So this is from the backyard here, and the next picture as well will kind of give you a better idea. So as part of our renovations, we'd like to raise the roof line of the rear of this addition a small amount. I don't want to get too much into the details of that because I know that might be kind of part 2 of this hearing. So with that, I'll leave it there and definitely open to answer any questions the commission might have.
All right, thank you very much, John. I know that, and just for the benefit of the commissioners and anyone else, there was some, as often is with older houses, some discrepancies as to exactly when it was built. 1850, 1870, it's not quite clear, but it is on the data sheet listed as contributory. So that would tend to almost make it I don't want to say a no-brainer, but it would be rare for us to not consider it historically significant in a case like that. Is there any comment or alternately a motion from the board as to historical significance and consideration for preservation?
Yes, this is Joe Morgan. I move that 68 Milk Street is historically significant and it should be considered for preservation.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe. Is that seconded?
I'll second it. It's Peter.
Okay, Peter, thank you. Okay, sorry to keep making you first, Malcolm, but that's just the order I have these on. So Malcolm, your vote, historically significant and considered for preservation.
You know, it's, I wish we had some other pictures like the front of the house and some other stuff, but yeah, if it's that age, then I would say it should be preserved. I'm not necessarily saying that this bump out should be preserved.
Yep, and we'll be getting to that shortly. Thank you, Malcolm. Christopher Fay?
I'm a yes.
Okay, Peter?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Okay, the chair is in agreement. Okay, so at this point, you're right, Mr. Ramo, we move on as we did for the first one. So it's considered for preservation. So now we consider your demolition plan and what it is you want to do. And we do the similar procedure we just did as far as preferably preserved and whether or not we want to approve the plan. So again, just as we did before you go through your whole plans, we'll do the public comment period. So I don't expect that's going to be very long, but we will do that, make it official. So I'm going to officially open a public comment period. So again, if you are an attendee and would like to speak to this particular project for or against either, whatever, particularly as this is the Historical Commission, we're interested in our role is to just ensure that there is no detriment to the historical values. So if you have a comment along those lines, this would be the time. So we'll give just a few seconds, see if anyone raises a hand. Looking pretty clear. All right, so I'm not seeing any, so we will close the public comment period. Okay, so Mr. Ramo, why don't you go ahead and describe what it is you plan to do, and we will go from there.
Sure. So as I mentioned, we're doing some renovations on the interior of the home, and as part of that, we'd like to make the ceiling height of the first floor consistent as it stands right now. That small addition ceiling height is about 2 feet shorter than the rest of the first floor. So as part of our design, we'd like it to all be consistent, and to do that, what we've come up with, as you can see here, is as the addition currently stands. And then if you go down to the next slide, we're proposing to change the style of the roof line from that gable style that you saw before to this shed style roof. From the highest point on the existing was 12 feet 9 inches. I believe it is. Let me just double check that. So existing height at the highest point is 12 feet 9 inches. And from the outside, we're proposing to raise it to 14 feet even. So it's about a 15-inch increase. Again, the reason for this is part of our renovations on the interior to make it consistent throughout the home with the ceiling height. So we ask that the commission considers this proposal. We think that it's a pretty slight change and shouldn't have much impact. So with that, I'll open it up to you guys.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's say I'll start with Peter this time. Peter, any thoughts or comments regarding the this situation?
No, I think I think as the homeowner says, it's a fairly modest change. It seems logical. Doesn't detract from the rear aspect of the house, which very few people are going to see anyway. So
Yeah.
I'm fine with it.
Okay, thanks, Peter. How about you, Joe? Any comments?
No, I have no objections. Looks like a good solution.
Okay. How about Malcolm? Any thoughts or comments? From what you said earlier, it sounded like you didn't have a problem with the plan.
Right. No problem.
Okay, and Christopher Fay, thoughts or comments?
No, I peeked inside this house online when it was for sale, and it definitely needs a lot of work. So I'm in favor of updating this small addition.
Okay. All right, good. It sounds like we're in agreement then. Is there a motion that that it's historically significant and preferably preserved, after which we can have the vote on whether or not we approve the plans, which
So
So is-
moved.
okay, so the motion is that it's historically significant and preferably preserved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, that was Chris, right?
Chris, yep.
Okay, Malcolm, your vote on that?
Yes.
Okay, Christopher Fay?
Yes.
Okay, Peter McNamee?
Yes.
Thank you. Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Okay, and the chair is yes. Okay, is there a motion to approve these plans and lift the demolition delay?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, thank you. That was Malcolm. Is there a second?
I'll second. That's
Peter,
good.
right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, Malcolm, your vote?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
Yes.
Chris May? Thank you.
Yes.
Peter McNamee?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And the chair is also agrees. So, Mr. Ramo, good news for you. The board doesn't see any adverse impact from what you propose to do. And the building commissioner will be, instructed that you can build, permits can be issued and so on. So the demo delay was, again, only enforced for a matter of minutes. So you're all set.
Great. Thank you to the commission for your time.
You're very welcome. Okay. Next, 40 Winter Street. And I believe we're back with Attorney Mead. And I'm not sure who else will be speaking, but again, this is a property, excuse me, I'll let the Attorney Mead describe it, but it's a slightly more ambitious project on Winter Street, a couple doors up from a project we had recently at 30 Winter Street. So Attorney Mead, you want to address initially the historic
Yes, thank you,
historical
Mr.
significance?
Chair.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Sure.
So for the record, Lisa Mead, Tellerman Costa, 30 Green Street, on behalf of Scott and Jean Clark, and this is their house. With me this evening are the Clarks, as well as Larry Reeves, who is the architect on the project. You can go to the next slide, Caitlin. So this actually is a really interesting house and piece of property, as I'm sure the board has read from our submission. It was constructed in or around 1920. It is listed as contributing to the district on the district data sheets, but there is no Form B on this project, on this property. But it's listed in the district data sheets as a late Queen Anne style architecture. However, I think that when you look at this, you're all going to agree that it's more reminiscent of an American four-square house. Indeed, it has many elements of that. So the structure does not appear at its current location on the 1914 Sanborn Map, the 1924 Assessors Map, or the 1934 takings plan for Route 1. And so we say, where was the house? What I'm going to do is go to the next slide, please. So here is the plan. You can see at the bottom of the plan here, you see Winter Street upcoming to High Street. You're all familiar with the very nice house at the corner of Winter and High. You'll see it has a much larger backyard at this time in this 1914 Sanborn Map, but this house, which is there today, does not exist at this time. Next slide, please. Again, here's the 1924 Assessors Map. The lots have been divided, but no house exists on this parcel yet. Next slide, please. So in moves the Route 1 corridor, and here's the takings plan from the Registry of Deeds for 1934. You can see the location where this house soon will be, but there is no house at this time. The next slide, please. The house was down on Winter Street at Pleasant Street. I've highlighted it a little bit here. And we've determined through our research that this house was moved up to this location where it currently exists today at 40 Winter Street. If you go to the next slide, please. And today is the My Map. So you can see the overview of where the house sits proudly today at 40 Winter Street. As I did mention, there is no Form B for the property, but there is a Form H for the Washington Street residential neighborhood. And within that is where we started to determine how this house came to be in this location. So the document notes that the two houses at the top of Winter were transplanted, one from across the way on Winter, and one was removed from Pleasant Street. Both are 20th century homes. There are 6 houses on Winter Street, numbers 38 and 40 are the top 2 at the top of Winter. And that comes from the Form H. We also determined that through our research at the Registry of Deeds related to the eventual A&Ring or splitting off of subdividing the lots that sits at the corner of High Street and Winter Street. So based upon that information, the deeds from 1935 and 1941, as well as the Form H and the 1934 takings plan, it's pretty clear that the house that was down at Pleasant Street, which was listed as parcel 86, came up to this location at 40 Winter Street. If you can go to the next slide, please. So here's a house, a view from across Route 1 from Summer Street, and you're looking straight onto the house. Next slide, please. And this is a view from Winter Street, including the back porch, including the porch at the back of the house. You can see it on the corner there. Next slide, please. And here's another view from Winter Street, looking down Winter. Next slide, please. And here's a view of the rear of the house. And the next slide, please. So with that, we'd ask the commission make a determination relative to its historic significance and whether or not it should be preferably preserved.
Thank you, Attorney Mead. Okay. So any comments from the commissioners on historical significance? Or motions to that effect?
Again, this is Joe, and I'll move that 40 Winter Street is historically significant and we should consider it for preservation.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Joe. Is there a second for that?
I'll
I'll
second.
second that, Chris.
Okay. It's like Chris and Peter. So hang on. I think I heard, well, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Okay, 1 second. So the vote, Malcolm Carnwath, we're voting it's historically significant and considered for preservation. Your vote?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Christopher Fay?
Yes.
Thank you. Peter McNamee?
Yes.
Thank you. Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Okay, and the chair also votes yes. So as we have been doing, pardon me, we'll open a public comment period. So I'll officially open that now. So if you have a comment to make regarding this particular project, please use the Zoom control, or again, I think it was *9 on your phone to indicate raised hand. Actually, I don't see any people on by phone, so it'd be a Zoom control. So allow several, moments to see if anyone has a and I'm Seeing no hands. So you agree, Caitlin? You're not seeing any hands either, I take it?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, then I will officially close the public comment period. And I'll turn to the Attorney Mead and company to discuss their plans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the proposal, which I'm going to have Larry go over in a minute, is to add an addition to the rear of the structure, which will constitute a roof line change. I might add that while this may be in the DCOD, there are not removing more than 25% of the exterior walls. So we're here for the roof line change, as the chair noted. The addition is minimally visible from the street. As you'll see, it's similar in form, style, and materials, and still subservient to the existing structure. It does overlay the existing roof, and Larry's going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about, he's going to point out the windows and the decorative sashes that we have that are going to go back up, and how the existing aluminum siding is going to be removed. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Well, why don't we go to the next plan, which is the site plan. So I think if you could just blow this up a little bit, Caitlin, I think it's pretty important. So here's the site plan, and in the, let's call it orangish brown towards the back, that's the footprint of the addition. And you can see a little bit of the overlay of the existing structure there. So you'll see it, there's a bump out that comes out that's similar to the bay on the bottom of the plan, but everything else is tucked behind the existing house. So with that, I'm going to go to the next set of plans, and those are the elevations, and I will turn it over to Mr. Reeves.
There we go. Terrific. Does everybody hear me just fine?
Yep, we can hear you. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks all. This is Larry Reeves. I'm the architect for Scott and Jean, and we actually, they came to me for to look at doing an addition to their lovely historic home, looking to do a family room and master suite and do some kitchen rework and all that fun stuff. And at the same time, while they're at it, wanted to be able to provide a good, safe transition from the main floor down to the exterior, as well as a better connection to the lower basement level. So that just programmatically was the basic idea of things, but overriding all of that was a strong recognition of the house as a historical entity, as something that was worth preserving in itself. So before we even knew of the need to come before you as a board, we already had begun our plans based on really doing something that was complementary to the existing house. As it is, our solution, based on sort of proximities, it is a tight site. The driveway area was impacting much of our decisions on how big we could go to the sides of the house. But we're additionally, as we started to look at the size of the rooms and configuration, we ended up with the massing reflecting the existing house quite a lot. And that from in fact, I think maybe actually on the next slide, if you could. You can see on the left side elevation, the addition portion is really a combination of the gable itself is reflecting of the existing gable that faces the rear of the house, and the clipped corners are intended as reflecting the bay windows that we have both at the living room area and the dining room in this case, which is the east and north faces, which turns out to be the front and the right elevations. But that, so in effect, we've essentially in this left elevation, as we kind of added the gable to the side there, we pulled the roof line back, connected the masses, but that it's in effect a stretched version of the north elevation. So we're aware of that. Might go back to that last slide then. So the you know, we were at the same time looking to from the north side of the site, switching the driveway over there. That gave us room to also hold the addition back toward more southerly, so that we'd have more light into the spaces for the Clark's use, and also leaving more open area to the north of the addition, so the outdoor space would be a nice, comfortable space as well. A little more specific items relative to siding. We do have aluminum siding, as was mentioned. We do plan on pulling that off. We'd like to assess the existing siding because it certainly is the size, proportions, the detailing of that, along with all the trim work. It does appear to be intact still. I think we have a photo of that was in the existing conditions packet. And a little small to see all the details, but it's potentially we will need to do some replacement of the siding. We need to do an assessment of it to see how things have fared over the years under the aluminum. But our intent is to, at the very least, duplicate the detailing of it. If need be for replacement, likely would look at the composite. But not a vinyl or anything like that, but a solid composite or a natural wood as it works out best. Trims, as we're uncovering things, they appear to be very simple. We do have a reference of the house next door that is essentially a sister house to this, has very, very similar, if not identical, detailing, and is good as a reference. It doesn't appear that there are a lot of sort of details that were removed when the house was moved. So we think it's pretty much what we're seeing now. It's a very, very simple, clean detailing, which is consistent with the time period. The roofing, the existing slate roofing is in really rough condition and is as everyone knows, the cost is quite high to replicate that, so the completeness of that, or I should say just the treatment of that, ongoing maintenance, etc. It doesn't look feasible for that. So we are going with a high quality architectural shingle, asphalt composite shingle on the roof. We are showing the same on all of our lower porch areas. We would like to consider, we haven't gotten all the pricing back in, but we've actually looked at doing a standing seam metal on the low sloped roof areas. And would like to get some feedback on that if you happen to have any feelings on that as an option. At the moment, we do have it set as asphalt shingles, so we'll go from there. The windows, as Lisa mentioned, the house, actually this Clark's house as well as the adjacent house, both have a mix of style happening. There are several windows that have a fairly elaborate 4 or 5 over 1 with a kind of a diamond pattern, but the majority of the house actually has a 2 over 1. So they did reserve those decoratives for mainly the main living spaces, and then for whatever reason, things were shifted. So we're proposing to use the 2/1s as our reference for the new areas. I think essentially a couple of other items that are in here. You can see in the existing right and rear elevations, there is a chimney shown there. That was actually a after the fact, so to speak. That was a very simple chimney that had been installed for the boiler in back when the house was moved, and that chimney is no longer used. Boiler is not. It was an oil or coal or whatever it was, but it was converted to gas quite a while back, and has not been used for many years. And there's no fireplace in the house. There never appears that there never was. And unless it was there before they moved it, but once it was moved, it was never there. So that chimney we're removing. However, we do have a new fireplace planned for the new addition, and you can see the chimney. We are running up straight up from the family room, and we would like to use a historically correct thin brick veneer on that chimney as it comes out and is exposed. I think I think that's about it. I think we did as far as the roof lines, you can see, I guess that's probably the last real piece to kind of touch on here is that the existing roof, as you can kind of see on the right side elevation there, we've raised the ridge, and the red line actually helps for a reference point. We've raised the ridge about 16 inches relative to the existing plane of the roof line. And from the north side, we have some shed roofs that we're tying in but are holding that high ridge point as a gable element coming to the rear. We did introduce a little sitting area balcony up on the 3rd floor, that having the ability to get out and actually use that space, as opposed to it being just a great big open unfinished attic. They are planning on finishing it out, so that space would be a great spot to catch some outdoor sunsets and all that fun stuff. But we've tucked that in very, very discreetly to minimize that as something very different up in there. The viewable position of it, that's actually not visible as a balcony element from that rear elevation. It's extremely hard. You have to be on a private property to be able to see that on the other side of the rail trail.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I think that's it.
Okay, I do have, speaking of roof lines, I'm confused about on the rear elevation, that's the upper right quadrant of this drawing we're looking at. The roof is going straight out and then straight down, which confuses me because in the side elevation, it looks, I don't know, it looks like it's a gable there that so is that, am I confused or what?
No,
Yeah, I think it's the flat drawing, right? So it's an optical illusion. Can you go to the next slide down, Caitlin, I think?
Yeah, so the corresponding is the upper left-hand corner. So that is the gable expression that from the south view, which is really, this is the only view that you have from the street that is visible of the addition.
Oh, okay, I'm seeing it now. So that left side elevation, upper left here, that triangle in the upper left, that's the gable that's the outline of it we're seeing on the front elevation on the right.
correct. If you want to, and then if you could just, Caitlin, go back up to the slide before just to show Glenn. So there you go. So that's on, now we're on the right-hand
Yeah,
side, Glenn.
okay.
right? You see it? Okay.
Yeah, okay, it makes sense. It makes more sense now. All right, thanks for that.
If I could just, before, Glenn, I just want to point
Sure.
out, Caitlin, if you could go to the last slide, I just think, just to show you the care that, yeah, right there, the last two slides. So these are windows that have been in storage that the Clarks have that will be reinstalled on the south elevation and the one above. Caitlin, please. And then as are these. So I you know, they have taken care to hold on to these windows to be able to reuse them. I thought that was just an important fact for the commission to see. And I would just point out one other thing, that we have received a letter of support from the neighbor at the corner on the south at the corner of High and Winter Street. And with that, Mr. Chair, would love to hear any questions you might have.
Okay, well, thanks. I think you've answered mine, and you sort of answered one I was just going to ask about. I really like the windows with the fancy, for lack of a better term, upper sash with the 5 panes and so forth, the ones you were just showing us that have been held onto. So the question is, am I correct in understanding that you intend to keep all of those that you have, and they will be, you know, installed and rehabbed as necessary?
I believe that's correct. Correct, Larry?
That's my understanding too.
Okay. All right, let me turn to the commissioners. Does anyone have a question for the architect or Attorney Mead on the project? Or I can go around. Actually, when I do that, when I do what I was doing earlier, to go quickly around my fellow commissioners here, see what comments, folks, and thoughts people might have. Joe, looks like you're on top of my list this time. Joe Morgan, you have any thoughts on this particular scenario?
Well, I think the design is very nice. It seems to work pretty well with the existing structure. Since it's a 1920s building, I don't think, I mean, it's historical with a small h, I think, in my mind. And certainly it should be preserved. It's a beautiful structure, and I think it's being enhanced through this work. It's being enlarged, but I don't believe it's overly destructive of the existing structures. Right. So I support that. My only architectural comment was the architect asked specifically about a metal roof, and I really can't. I don't know to what degree that's in a historical feature in those residential houses of this style during this particular time period. I don't have any a priori objection to small applications of metal roof on low sloped areas. Certainly wouldn't. I don't think I'd want to see it on a high roof, but I don't as an accent in other areas. That seems like it would be fine for me. So that's all I have. Okay, thank you, Joe. So it sounded like you didn't feel there was a adverse impact in terms of the historical value of the house. Yeah, I don't think so. Okay, how about you, Peter? Any thoughts?
I will agree with everything that Joe Morgan said. Particularly with regards to the roof and the overall design. I like a great deal. I think it's fine. I do have a question. The architect briefly mentioned the siding being replaced, the aluminum siding coming off, and if the siding underneath needs to be replaced, probably with a composite. And I have no objection to composite materials. I have an objection to the appearance of composite materials, since they only mimic the line of a clapboard. They don't have that flare at the bottom, you know, they're consistent with and whatnot, unless there's a product that I'm not aware of that does do that now. If there is, composite's fine. So that's one comment. And the other comment that I had was covered by Joe Morgan.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I'll quickly comment that I know that Hardy plank or Hardy, whatever it is, Hardy board type composite has generally been approved. I think this commission has approved it in the past, and other historical commissions have, because especially once it's painted, it's you got to be, if you're not close to it, it's hard to distinguish it from like let's say cedar clapboards, but I have seen, I'm not sure if it's hardy plank or something else, but I have seen examples where either through improper installation or whatever, it tends to split, or I don't know, but that's not our concern right at this point. Anyway, Malcolm, any thoughts from you on that? And or if Larry, if you wanted to comment on the maybe no, sorry, that was the prior one. If the architect had any comments on that siding issue for Mr. McNamee, that we'd hear that as well.
Actually, I mean, that's a terrific comment, because I actually have, for many years, was reluctant myself to use the composites, but there are now a thicker board available. Especially Hardy is providing that option that gives an even deeper shadow line, which is a little bit more historically consistent then. I think that's that. At the same time, it is possible to achieve the better shadow line with the installation technique. The part of that is the tighter they get the coursing, the better the lines are. But the thicker product is actually the better product at this point.
Okay, thank you.
But it is that is a significant concern for us as well. It wants to be what it was. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Thank you. Christopher, Faye, any thoughts from you on this?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm a little torn on this one because
yeah. Oh, you're cutting out on us a bit, Chris.
Sorry. Yeah, keep losing this connect. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you right now.
Okay. So because I'm looking at the back of the house, the right side of the back of the house as you're facing it has got a lot of different things I don't like, but then the addition on the back and it just seems to overwhelm it for me, the back of the house. And I know it's the back of the house, and I know people's views on the back of the house are different than the front of the house, but my views on the back of the house is that it's part of the house. I'm a little disappointed that I don't know how old the porch is. You can't really tell, but it seems like a nice little porch there. But I would sense the prevailing notion is to go ahead and approve this anyway. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you. And Malcolm, any? I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut you off there, Chris. Malcolm, any thoughts from you on this?
Yeah, I think this is. I'm happy with this design. I think the only thing I worry about is people throwing water balloons down from that 3rd floor deck onto the rail trail.
Oh man, you weren't supposed to say that.
I see. Well, I think it's beyond. That's outside the scope of the historical commission, I think I'll have to say. Okay. So
Mr. Chair, excuse me, I'm just actually reminded, I have one question, and it's really just a request to, you see on the back elevation where the old chimney comes out on the lower right-hand elevation there.
Existing?
That is correct on the existing. So and then if you see right above it, you can't see that same section of the roof because of the addition. The applicants were trying to get a little more light into that area of the 3rd floor, and we're considering putting a skylight in there, a small one. Larry, what size?
About 30 by 30. And the location, actually looking here, is the rear elevation, and essentially where the chimney is, that small triangle that is left over at the roof intersection, it would be centered up in that area at very high points. And the goal is to get some light down into the center of the attic area without introducing a bunch of extra dormers and things. That seemed, in this case, because it's hidden pretty extensively, there really isn't a place that you can see that little peak of the roof. And it seemed like a good spot to do that without having to introduce a whole nother large dormer element.
And so our question was, and this just actually, it came to us this morning when we were preparing for this. So that it was not on the plan. So I just wanted to know that if the commission considered that acceptable, that you could condition the demolition delay, that could be included. If you were amenable to it.
Okay. All right. Well, what I'll do, Attorney Mead, is we'll first take the vote on whether it's preferably preserved. I think we know which way the wind is blowing on that one. And we'll address this issue of whether we need to come back to see the final plan, or if we can just take that as a some kind of stipulation or condition for on approval tonight. Okay.
Oh, sure. I thought you already took that vote a few minutes ago. So I apologize.
we voted that it was historically significant and considered for preservation.
Oh, okay. All right. I got it.
So what's required now, and I think my question's been answered as well. As far as my opinions, they've pretty much been stated. Mr. Morgan stated it well as far as the standing seam roofing. I agree with him that for like a small overhang, like for example, the roof of a bay or that type of thing, I think it would be okay, but I agree with him that it wouldn't be appropriate for any, significant roofing area, and it would kind of look out of place. So unless there's something else, why don't we, someone like to make the motion that it's historically significant and preferably preserved, and then we can discuss this issue of approval or not of this plan and in front of us. Okay. Is there such a motion?
I'll make that motion, this is Peter.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Is it seconded?
Seconded, Joe.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Okay, Malcolm, preferably preserved, significant and preferably preserved.
Yes.
Okay, Christopher Fay.
Yes.
Thank you. Peter McNamee.
Yes.
Thank you. Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Okay, chair is a yes. Okay, so the approval of the plans, I'll be honest with you, I'm reluctant to, I know it gets messy, but I'm welcome to hear from the board if they agree that we'd rather see finalized plans, at our next meeting, and just take a vote on it then. Does anyone have a strong opinion on that either way? Because I think I'd be more comfortable with that. Any comment? Malcolm, I see you unmuted yourself. Oh, you didn't. Okay, Chris, you have a thought?
Yeah, I think just, if it's a quick vote, a quick view, I'd be in favor of that waiting, just for protocol sake.
Yeah. I think that would be good. So, I hope you understand that,
Well, so then I would say, Mr. Chair, then I think we'd rather have your vote without the skylight. And then if we decide to put the skylight, we could come back in for a modification.
Oh, I see. So that wasn't a definite thing.
Well, they would like it, but it's not drawn, and they'd prefer to have an approval and a release and then finally decide it. And if they decide to have it in, then come back for a modification.
Oh, I see. Modification to a plan.
Correct.
And yeah, I know with that's a thing, right, Caitlin? They can come back with a to the planning office with a modification to the plan.
That's right. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, it sounds like that's kosher and legal. So so why don't we take a vote then on whether or not to approve the plan? So the motion would be that the plans as presented tonight and discussed tonight would be approved and the demolition delay lifted. Is there such a motion?
Chair, can I ask a question before we?
Yes, Peter.
With regards to the sequencing of that,
Yes.
what would be the what is the sequencing of that? If we vote to approve this tonight and they move forward and then come back and ask to get further approval with the skylight.
The
in
skylight,
place,
yeah.
And we don't like that. What happens then?
That's a good question. My understanding, and Caitlin, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that it wouldn't necessarily come back before this board. But it goes to the, correct me if I'm wrong here, Caitlin. I know that when there's a quote, I think that it would go to Jennifer as an application for a minor change to a plan. And I think that between Jennifer and the planning office would decide if it's significant enough to be approved by the staff there, or if it's, I should say insignificant enough, or if it's significant enough to come back before us to be reviewed and approved. Caitlin, does that sound right?
Yep, that sounds right.
Okay, hopefully that answers your question, Peter.
Sure.
I know it's that now you see why my preference was to have the clean plan to begin with. So there's the risk there that the planning office, might, but we can certainly remain in touch with them and make known our,
Mr. Chair, I would make a commitment. Well, there's no intention of skirting around the Historic Commission here.
Mhm.
I would make a commitment to the Historic Commission that if the skylight if the applicants decided to want to put the skylight in, that they would just ask Jennifer to send us back to the commission.
Okay.
Period.
All right. That makes me more comfortable. Yeah, I assume you too, Peter. That's so they would come back.
Yes.
Have that reviewed.
Yes.
Does that answer your concern, Peter?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so returning to the potential motion, I don't think it's been made yet to approve the plans to remove the demo delay. Is there such a motion now?
So moved.
Okay, that sounded like Malcolm. Okay, is that seconded?
Seconded.
Okay,
Joe.
that was Joe, yes. Okay, Malcolm, your vote on that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Christopher. Faye?
Yes.
Okay, Peter McNamee.
Yes.
Okay, Joe Morgan.
Yes.
And the chair is also yes. And the chair votes yes, but adding that fortunately for you, that somewhat odd roof deck, you did say it when you presented it. I agree. It's fortunately going to be pretty much invisible to anyone but the owners and someone scaling the wall there by the rail trail. So you kind of got away with that. Okay. So let's move right along here. We have one more demo delay hearing. Attorney Mead is again representing this applicant. It's a residence at 303 High Street. So do you want to tell us about this particular structure, Attorney Mead?
Yes, thank you. Again, for the record, Lisa Mead, Telemacosta, 30 Green Street, Newburyport. With me this evening is Laura McLaughlin and Stephen Quish, who are the owners of this property. The designer, Phineas Gay, wasn't able to be here this evening, so lucky you, I get to explain the architectural drawings as well when we get there. So this, if you can go to the first slide, please, Caitlin. This house was constructed in around 1875, according to the district data sheets. It is listed as contributory. It's located in the High Street Residential B zoning district, and there is no Form B for the property. It is listed as a side hall Italianate architecture. The earliest available map that shows the structure is the 1924 Assessors Map. That is because the Sanborn maps don't go all the way up to this area of the city when they were created. That's not to say that there's not a map out there that might show it, but we could not find one. So we did find, if you could go to the next slide, the 1924 Assessors Map does show this at the top of this map. You can see it, the house at the corner of High and I was going to say Jefferson, and now I can't remember the name of that street. It's not Jefferson, North Atkinson. So there's the house at the top of the street. And, you know, if you shop at the Natural Grocer at all, you'll have seen this house on a number of occasions. Next slide, please. So here is the current My Maps, the Assessors Map. And this is a long, narrow lot, as you can see. So if work was to be done on this house, consistent with keeping it out of view, certainly from High Street, it would be done in the rear of the house. It appears on that 1924 map that the footprint is smaller, at least in the front portion of the structure, than it is today. So there was a later added, perhaps one-story addition added later on the house that's not flush with the south side, but rather is about half the width of the main 2 1/2 story portion of the house. So with that, Mr. Chair, if you go to the next slide, please. So here's the front view of the house, not unfamiliar to most of you, I'm sure, from the opposite side of High Street. Next slide, please. And again, here's another view of the house without the snow. Next slide, please. And here is the back side of the house coming down, excuse me, the side of the house as you travel west on High Street. Next slide, please. And that's as you travel east on High Street, you see that side porch. And next slide, please. And here's the view from North Atkinson Street. Next slide, please. And again, across the street on North Atkinson, and you can see that one-story addition in the back. Next slide, please. And again, the small addition in the back seems like it was added when the porch was added. Next slide, please. And here from the rear of the property, and the next slide, please. And further down North Atkinson Street. So with that, Mr. Chair, if you go to the next slide, we would like the commission to make the determination relative to historic significance and whether or not it be preferably preserved.
Okay, thanks very much. Oop. Thanks very much. Oh, thought I was muted, but I wasn't. Okay, so board, any thoughts or comments, or would someone like to go ahead and make that motion that it's historically significant and should be considered for preservation?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, that sounded like Malcolm. Is there a second for that?
And this is Joe. I will second that.
Okay, thank you, Joe Morgan. So Malcolm, your vote on that?
Preferably preserved. Yep.
Well, considered for preservation. We'll decide on the preferably preserved after that comes after the review, demo plan review. But this is it's historically significant and quote, considered for preservation. That's the first step of this process. But I think your vote is probably still yes. Because
yes.
Yeah. Okay, Christopher Fay.
Yes.
Okay, Peter McNamee.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Okay, and the chair is yes. Okay, so it's considered for preservation. So let's go on to the demo plan review after a brief public comment period. We still have a few attendees here, so I will officially open a public comment period for several moments and to give people an opportunity to raise their hand if they wish to make a comment regarding this particular project. Please use the Zoom controls to raise your hand so we know that you wish to make a comment. So allow a few moments to go by for that to happen. And if we don't see any after a reasonable period of time, we'll close that period. I should have some little syncopated clock music or something. Okay, not seeing any hands, so I'll go ahead and close the public comment period. And so I'll turn the floor back over to you, Attorney Mead, to do the best job you can presenting the plans. As I recall, they weren't terribly complicated, so I'm sure you'll do fine. So why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. Next slide, please, Caitlin. So just as an overview, the proposals to construct, I'm going to say a two-story addition onto the rear of the structure that constitutes the roof line change. So as you recall in those photographs, there was a one-story addition on the back. So essentially there's an addition going to be built on top of that, but then beside it, that's going to be enlarged a little bit, which becomes a new portion of that one floor and the two floor on top of that. And then there'll be a second floor bay bump out that's also going to be added to the south side of the structure, which is designed to match the existing first floor bay window on the same side of the structure. And then there will be a smaller addition. The addition is smaller in size and shorter than the original structure. We're proposing to have matching shingles, trim, siding, doors, double hung windows as the existing structure. And the addition to the rear is obviously going to be able to be seen from North Atkinson Street, but really, other than the bay window, won't really be able to be seen from High Street. So if you could go to the site plan, please, Caitlin. So if you could blow that up a little bit, because it kind of helps explain in pictures better than in words what's happening. So you can see the main box of the original structure is up front. And then the addition is going to be built on top of what is currently that back story, one-story addition with a little bit larger footprint. And then you see the bay window and then the one-story mudroom off the back behind that. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So here's the existing conditions from High Street. Next slide, please. And then from the east elevation. Next slide, please. And then there's the rear elevation of the existing condition. And so you can see from this elevation how I'm talking about how that actually current one story will be both widened and raised. Next slide, please. And then here is the North Atkinson Street elevation. So if you go to the next slide, we start to have our proposed elevations. And again, here's your front elevation. And you can see that we do have that bump out, that bay bump out, which matches the first story bay from the front elevation. And that's essentially what you can see from High Street. Next slide, please. And here's the east side elevation again. So you see that we have the same materials. We have the 2/1 windows. The windows, by the way, will be vinyl. I'm not sure whether they're going to be aluminum or vinyl clad, wood inside, muttons inside and out with spacers. As again, architectural shingles and clapboards to match at the same reveal. Next slide, please. And here's from the rear. So you see that the addition is more narrow and shorter than the existing structure. And then you can see that little one-room bump out as well on the back, which is the mudroom. Next slide, please. And again, we have the 2/1 windows to carry from the original structure, so that the window design is the same. And on the side, you see that existing window is staying with that cute little 4 or 5 panes at the top. But the rest of it is 2/1 as is on the original structure. Next slide, please. That might be the last slide. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Attorney Mead. So just so I'm clear, I wonder if we could go back. Could you go back one slide, please, Caitlin? I think this is looking at this, right? This is the proposed. So starting from the top, you've got the main roof line that's of the existing house, and that doesn't change. And then you've got just below that the new roof line of the proposed addition, correct?
Correct.
Now the next gable down, sort of a shallower slope roof, is that the existing one-story addition on the back that we're looking at there with that shallow pitch?
That is correct.
Okay, so this one isn't. It's not on the same footprint as that. It's sort of built up from that. Okay, and then we need a side view to see. Can you go back up one more to 22, please? Okay, so you see the step down, goes out, and then there's that little, so that shallow pitch roof is hidden in this view because it's on the west side, so we're not seeing it here, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, all right, I'm just trying to, visualize this.
So on this side, on the east view, if I could, Mr. Chair,
yep.
The plane of the addition on the wall is the same, right? It's got the same plane, but for that bay bump out.
Right.
Then if you go to that rear view again, Caitlin, you can see that the addition, the second floor addition does not take up the full volume of that more shallow pitch, right? It's just towards the back.
Yes.
What is the back of the house. And then, if you will, it goes down. They do widen that a little bit by that whole first and second floor addition. I don't know how better to explain that, but it does not take up the entire section of that existing first floor.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of a, and that existing first one-story addition, sorry to belabor this, with this shallow roof, is that changing at all other than having this second story kind of sprouting from the top of it?
Well, I would have to check the windows. So if you could go up to the existing rear.
Yeah, I'm talking about the, just to be clear, I'm talking about the footprint of it. Does that change at all?
Oh, no.
Okay.
As you can see from this elevation, right?
Okay, so that's kind of the same, but it has this two-story thing sort of added, that's just shifted over to the right a bit.
There you
Okay,
go, right.
I think, yeah, okay, or at least I think I understand it now. Okay, so that's the plan, that's the demolition plan. And now the, you didn't, I don't remember seeing, usually you have very helpfully cross-hatched areas as to where the demos take place. Do we have a drawing that shows that? I don't recall.
So it's a, we don't have it on here, but obviously
Yeah.
Jennifer had it, right? So we
Okay.
have done that calculation. That's how we came here for the
Yep.
demolition delay as opposed to DCOD.
Okay. All right. Let me turn to my colleagues on the panel here. I'll go around the horn as before in somewhat random order. Let's see. I'll start, Christopher, I'll start with you this time. Any thoughts or comments?
Skip me for now. I'm
Okay.
just curious what other people think.
Sure. That's fine. How about Joe Morgan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I appreciate your confusion on this elevation. Is this called rear here? Proposed rear, yes. And I think it's because in the confusion is I believe, is the fact that the two-story addition is actually coplanar with the existing shed facing the street, North Atkinson. And I think the architect has decided to still articulate the original gable, even though in this particular case, I think it just becomes a trim element. But I do believe it does confuse the elevation, but I mean, that's a design item. I guess that's someone's preference. Maybe what it does is it gives more visual separation between the window rhythm up above in the second floor and those existing windows on the below. Maybe that was the idea, but I agree. The whole pattern looks somewhat chaotic, but I don't think any of that detracts from the original building, which we consider to be historic.
Yeah.
It looks like all of this work is as an addition, and it's somewhat subordinate, and it's behind the high street elevation. So I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I hear you, Joe. It seems like the main thing it's interfering with, if anything, is that one-story addition, which almost certainly was not part of the original thing, building anyway. But yeah, I know it's and just to clarify something, this elevation we're looking at right now, the proposed second story there, to me, it is set in from the original building. That's clear, right?
That is correct. That's
Okay.
absolutely correct.
Yes, that's what I thought. Because I heard you saying something about coplanar there.
On the
Were you referring
opposite-
to on the opposite side, correct?
Opposite side.
Right. Okay. I see you nodding, Joe. Thanks. Okay. Yep. Yep. Sentiments similar to my own. How about Peter? Any thoughts on this?
Always takes me so long to find the mute button.
It's all right.
I like the use of the word chaotic, but I don't mind what it's showing. I'm actually kind of drawn to what's going on in the back. The original one-story addition is probably the least interesting portion of that elevation. I do have a question. It might just be a drafting error, but The window that Attorney Mead called out as being preserved appears to be different in two different drawings. So in this drawing, it shows those upper lights as just the top quarter of the window area. And on the existing conditions, it shows it as a normal 2/1.
That'd be slide 20, I think, Caitlin.
Yeah, I think that's what I tried to go back to earlier before I made that statement. Oh, I see. No, it does have the 2/1 in it. I think it's a drafting error.
So is it,
Mr.
is it,
McNamee.
is it the 2/1 and the proposed is in error?
I believe that to be the case.
I wonder if we can maybe, now that you've got my curiosity going, we can take a quick look at one of those photos. Maybe this might see it in this one. Try 10. See if we can see it in that one. Yep, 2/1 is what's there now.
Yeah.
So the existing drawing is correct.
Yeah, the
So-
windows, I just heard from my client, the window is staying the same. That window is staying the same. It's a drafting error.
Yeah, I have no issues.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Peter. And Malcolm, any thoughts from you on this?
No, I'm still digesting.
Okay. And then I'll go back to Mr. Fay, who wanted more time to mull it over as well. Have you arrived at any thoughts, Mr. Fay?
Yeah, it's just my first impressions which is a lot of times my first impressions is it just seems overwhelming to me, the addition. So I may just be to me, it's just as simple as it seems too big. I mean, people have used chaotic. It's hard for me to tell from the drawings, how far it is set back. It's just not my forte, so to speak, geometry and such.
Okay.
I don't know. So that's my impression. I'm concerned about the North Atkinson because, again, we talk about, well, you can't see this from the back, or this,
Right.
North Atkinson isn't as important as High Street. That's maybe I'm reading a little too much into the comments, but so, I mean, that would be my concern, but it's always difficult for me to tell just from the drawings. It's always easier for me if there's like renderings of, computer generated stuff, but that's just me.
Yeah, I had similar thoughts, and that I was wishing for some sort of 3D rendering that would have made it a little bit easier to visualize, because you have to kind of put together, these two-dimensional things from different, flat planes and try to figure out what it looked like. And I hear you're concerned, and I North Atkinson is actually a pretty well-traveled street because of the connection between High and Low Street there. So I wouldn't dismiss that view. I think it's kind of, to me, it's a little bit on the border. To me, it kind of squeaks in under the limbo bar there as far as whether it's, quote, too big or not. I like the fact that it's stepped in from the North Atkinson Street side. I like the fact that the roof line steps down. That helps differentiate it. So for example, this, you're driving east here on High Street. I think you'd barely notice it. North Atkinson Street, you'd certainly notice it, but I don't think it would be particularly objectionable. And I think I'd be echoing Mr. Morgan's comments in that overall, I don't see it having a significant deleterious historical impact. That's just my opinion. Well, so there's two votes ahead of us. The first one is whether we consider this historically significant and preferably preserved. So that's the next step in the process here, and then we can take a vote on whether or not we approve the plan. So regardless of how you feel about the plan, is there a motion that it is historically significant? Well, we already have decided that, and that it's preferably preserved. Is there such a motion?
I'll make that motion. This is Peter.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Is that seconded?
Seconded, Joe.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Joe. Okay, you sound a lot like Malcolm there, Joe. Okay, Malcolm, preferably preserved in your?
Yes.
Okay, Christopher Fay.
Yes.
Thank you, Peter.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, and Joe.
Yes.
And the chair agrees. So it's preferably preserved, and now the final, so that imposes the demolition delay. So now we have to decide whether to give the plans the go-ahead. Is there more discussion, or would someone like to make a motion?
I have,
Yeah.
I think I like this plan, and that first floor addition coming off the back from North Atkinson
Mhm.
actually looks a little better with something on top of it, I think.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm aesthetically all go on this.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Malcolm. Is there any other comment, or again, if someone would like to make a motion, that would be okay at this point. The motion would be that the plans as presented tonight are given our approval.
Yeah, this is Joe. I move that we approve the plans for 303 North Atkinson and that we remove the demo delay.
Thank you very much, Joe. Well put. Is
303
it seconded?
high.
I'm sorry?
303 high.
Oh, 303 high. Oh, what did you say, Joe?
I said North Atkinson, sorry.
Oh, yes,
I have
that's 303 High Street. Sorry.
303
Okay.
high.
Correction.
Let's be correct.
303 High Street. Now, is there a second for that?
I'll second it. It's Peter.
Okay, Peter, thank you. Okay, Malcolm, I'm going to guess that you're a yes on this.
Yes.
Okay, Christopher Fay.
I'm going to be a no on this one.
Okay, Peter.
Yes.
Okay, Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Okay, and the chair, I guess, is going to swing it. I'm okay with it. It's like, again, as I said earlier, to me, it is it's near the borderline, but I think for me personally, it does just squeak under the limbo bar, as I put it before. So we'll so you have 4 affirmative votes. I believe 1, 2, yes. So that is the required minimum, and you're okay to go with those plans, Attorney Mead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And members.
Yep, you're welcome. Okay, so we have the other last, well, actually, there's a couple more items on the agenda. The next one is, again, Attorney Mead, representing the owners of 4 Plum Street. You might remember this one. It's a small property on the corner there of on Plum Street. I'm not sure what the other street is. I forget at the moment, but this house is under a demolition delay that was imposed back on October 28th, and the applicant has made some revisions to the plans and is hoping to get the delay lifted. So do you want to review what has been changed here? And was it just Attorney Mead, is it just you, or do you have someone else speaking as well?
Well, you're stuck with me still, but we do have the architect, Jeff Alsop, is with us this evening too. So for the record, Lisa Mead, Tellem and Costa, 30 Green Street, for Mike Buchan and Anna Wallach, who are the owners of this house. And as I said, Jeff Alsop is with us this evening. If you go to the first slide, please, Caitlin. So you might remember when we were here last, the board did impose a delay. Anna and Mike are attempting to put some addition on their house, Plum Street. This house particular is a compact house, shall we say, and with their family, they're looking for a little bit more elbow room. And so based upon that, we did update the elevations and renderings and made a number of changes. We proposed the addition features clapboard siding to better differentiate it from the existing cedar shingle siding. The dormer remains except, and it remains exempt from the demo delay ordinance, except for that it has been redesigned, as the architect will talk to you about momentarily. The architect also has engaged with Lisa O'Donnell relative to the structural integrity of the house. He can speak a little bit more to that. As you know, he's done his own investigation regarding this, and strongly believes that the house can certainly undertake or withstand this renovation. Lisa will work with him because the investigation, of course, would require some intrusion into the walls and things like that. They haven't undertaken that because, of course, the family is living in the house. So at this point, that hasn't happened, but Lisa has been retained to be a part of the team, in addition, of course, to the significant experience the architect has with historic structures. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to talk about the changes that he's made. And if you could go to the next slide, please.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good, excellent. Yeah, this is the existing conditions drawing that we presented last time. We did not include the proposal from last time. We have really just brought along our new recommendation for the building. Again, on this sheet, you can see the existing building and the small addition that was built to the south. And can we move to the next slide, please? So one of the comments that we took to heart was that you felt that the dormer, which was formerly a shed dormer, was not in characteristic to the house or to the neighborhood, and gave the appearance of too much mass on the roof plane. So the first thing to notice is the northwest elevation, where we've modified that dormer to become a gabled dormer, which seems to really have reduced the scale quite a lot, and looks quite good from the street view. You'll notice that the clapboard, we haven't really modified the addition to the southeast, other than to employ wooden clapboards. And we just felt, one of your comments before was that it's nice to show an additive nature to historic structures if you are making changes, and I took that to heart, and I think I agree with you. I think it provides interest. It provides different scale. You can sort of see the fineness of the clapboards as opposed to the kind of more rustic, broader to weather that you have with the shingles. We're very careful still to use windows that were consistent with the existing house. We're not really, as opposed to your first presentation tonight, we're not looking to make this, remarkably different. We're still wanting this to be in the context and scale of the building itself, and of course the surrounding neighborhood. If you could go to the next slide. Just in keeping, again, we are very pleased with our renderer, and feel that he really captures the neighborhood and feel of the house. There again, you can see the sort of differentiation of the clapboard and the shingles. The final slide, please. Looking in the other direction. I think that's all I have to say about it at this point, but welcome any questions.
Okay, thanks very much. So this is normally we would have already had the public comment period, and we did have one for the initial review. Given this, I have no idea if there are people wanting to comment, but I did want to provide an opportunity if there are any abutters, neighbors, or other interested parties that wanted to comment. So I'm just going to open a very brief public comment period before we continue. Thank you, Caitlin. So if you're an attendee and you wish to comment on this particular updated plan for this proposal, I'll give you a minute to make that intention known. So please raise your hand if you so desire, and we'll allow a few moments for that. And then if no one so desires, we'll continue on. So far, no takers.
I have
Okay,
a question.
hang on just one second. I'm going to just first close the public comment period because I didn't see any hands raised, and then you can have the floor, Malcolm, to ask your question. Go ahead, Malcolm.
Do the owners of this house live in this house now?
Malcolm, this is Lisa Mead. The answer is yes, they live there now. And I also just would remind the board that we did provide a significant number of letters of support from all of the surrounding neighbors when we first appeared. But the answer is yes, they live there now.
Okay. Yep. Does that answer your question, Malcolm? And I think that did come up because I know Joe had expressed an interest in seeing interior, but due to the current COVID things and the fact that they are living there, et cetera, that they declined. They preferred not to do that. So the abutters, based on those letters and what they've said, they don't feel that the size of the addition is too large.
No, we gave you, I don't know, half dozen or more letters of support from the very beginning.
Okay, so let me turn to my colleagues and I'll do the same thing as I have been doing. Let's see, I'll start with, how about Peter this time? Do you have any thoughts or comments, Peter?
I don't. I like the changes that have been made.
Okay. Mr. Morgan, how about you? Any thoughts or comments?
Yes, I've gone back to the neighborhood a couple of times and walked Elm Street, and there's just something I found very compelling about that sequence of buildings up Elm Street, number 17 and then 19-21, and actually 23 Elm Street. And if you look at 23 Elm Street on the, on Google, or go to the Register of Historic Places, 23 Elm Street is AKA for 4 Plum Street. And they're the same parcel, 52-53, same map and parcel. So it's the same property, but they have different dates listed. Here, the presentation was, I think, 1850 per the Assessors Map, and then 1800 per the data sheet. And however, the National Register of Historic Places shows 23 Elm Street as 1750. 23 Elm Street, which is 4 Plum Street. So it may be older than we think. And if we compare it to 1921, those dates are circa 1700 to 1750. And 17 Elm Street, which is actually has a plaque on it, is 1777, moved in 1770, but it's also listed as a 1700 to 1750 building in its original location at Maryland Merrimack. So this is these buildings, it maybe possibly including 4 Plum Street, aka 23 Elm, could be all part of a historical, kind of a concentrated historical street front along Elm Street. Also, I think in my mind, it occupies a very exposed location. I mean, when you look at it from Olive Street, what's being proposed architecturally, I think, is fine. It's fairly modest, even though it's a modest structure. But because it's such a high visibility corner at Plum and Elm, which is a very historical street within the special district of the Washington Street Historic District, it seems to me that there's more pressure on this corner building to sort of maintain its profile, and it anchors that corner. And I'm going to have to go back on what I originally was thinking about this building, since we don't really know its historical pedigree. It seems to be somewhat in doubt. I'm going to have to suspend my more optimistic approach architecturally and go back and really think of it as a historical landmark building until we learn something a little bit more about what it is. It's clearly a timber frame building. It's a half house. but it matches that profile along Elm, making me think that it's vintage. It's the same vintage as its brothers and sisters along that east side of Elm. So I'm going to have to vote no on this one in terms of any intervention until we really figure out what this building is.
Okay. Thank you and appreciate the research you did there, Joe. Those addresses you mentioned on Elm Street. Elm Street is the one that goes down from Plum to Merrimack, correct?
That would be right. That's
yeah,
the
so-
one, as you
yeah.
go down, as you look at this view here,
Right.
it would be the next house to the left and down.
Right. And Plum goes off to the right towards Olive Street.
That's correct.
Okay. Let's see, who did Malcolm, any thoughts from you on this?
Yeah, I'm with Joe. I think this is a really kind of unique, special antique house, and I think the neighborhood's important. I actually lived in a crummy apartment at the foot of the Elm Street when I first moved here, and I just love these wonderful little 18th century houses. I just hate to see them all, enhanced or enlarged, It's just, I don't know. I don't like it. And sometimes I've gone up to Kittery, Maine or Elliott, Maine a lot lately. And there are a lot of times when they'll put a dormer like the one that's on the east or west side of this, and they give it all the Greek revival appointments. It's just a perfect thing. I don't know. I'm just I'm funny about this neighborhood.
Okay. No, I think you sounds like you share some of the same concerns that Joe raised, and in my own personal opinion is that there's some merit there. So let's see. I didn't hear from Christopher Fade. Any thoughts, Chris?
I don't have anything else to add. I would agree with Joe and with Malcolm. And, this is a neighborhood that's close to where I live, and I've walked these streets, and they're just small streets, and they're almost sort of step back in time. And again, my sort of gut reaction is that just from the renderings that you're losing the original building, and then I would agree with everything else that's been said before me.
Okay, so we obviously back in October, the vote that it was preferably preserved is already taken and voted on, and so that's been established. So that's what put it under the demo delay in the first place. So unless there's further deliberation at this point, we would hear a motion. The motion would be.
Mr. Can I just ask a couple of questions?
I suppose so.
Well, otherwise we don't know how to move forward. So I would like to, if that's all right, we could have a conversation that would.
Oh, I see. You're looking for some guidance.
So if you could go back to the other rendering, please, Caitlin. What I would like to add is, every single one of these houses, as we showed in the and I don't have it on here tonight because I had thought that we had really narrowed it down last time, the comments from the commission, but is that every single one of these houses, at least on the sides or the backs, have had various additions put on them. There's none that are in the original form. I don't believe. I'm going to say none, but I'm almost positive there's none. Almost every single one of them has some sort of addition or modification to that, because the homes have been changed to allow for somewhat of modern living, modern being in quotes, because certainly not current living. But that having been said, it is true that this line, even though this is clearly not the front of the house, technically, as is the one next down, it's got the pediment over the door and things of that nature, that if you go down Elm Street to Mr. Morgan's comment, those roof lines aren't interrupted, if you will. And so my question to the commission is, if the dormer were removed from from this roof. And therefore, that continued streetscape on Elm Street does not change. It remains intact. Would the commission approve it as proposed with the addition on the back, which is certainly consistent with the remaining neighborhood on both sides of Elm Street and Plum Street? And I would ask the commission's consideration of that.
Mhm. Okay, fair enough. I know speaking for myself, I agree with the comments about the dormer being quite uncharacteristic. So I would certainly be more favorable in view of this without the dormer. But let me hear from my colleagues, particularly, Joe, you've been very, you expressed the situation quite well. You want to react to that proposal? If the dormer was lost, would that impact your leaning towards approval or not?
Well, Chair, like I said, I think I'd like to see some additional historical research on the building. I'd like to know what we're talking about,
Right.
what its date is, what its pedigree is, and I think we should really ascertain exactly when it was built, if there's any other special historical aspects to the building that we may want to preserve before we actually talk about alterations to it.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments from my colleagues? Christopher, I see you're unmuted. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm not inclined to sort of do a pre-approval, I guess, is what I would look at it without.
Yeah, I don't think
For me,
that's what's being asked for.
Yeah, for me, it's not just the dormer. So
yeah. Okay. So anyone else, Joe or Malcolm? Excuse me, Malcolm or Peter, anyone else want to comment on the question that Attorney Mead has asked?
I think removing the dormer on that one side is a step.
Oh, you got cut off there. We lost you at is a step. And then
Sorry, I'd have to see the back also later.
Yeah. All right. So I think the sentiment, Attorney Mead, is yes, removing the dormer is a positive step, but I think that there's still two concerns. Joe has raised one about us wanting to be sure of our footing in terms of the historical context of that particular structure. I think it's obviously must have seen some changes, because they certainly would not have put a triple window up on the third, the attic floor like that back in, the 18th century, right? That I have never seen anything like that done. So there's obviously been changes. And if it was a half house, that entrance probably isn't, is probably on Elm Street, not Plum, and so forth and so on. My own personal feeling as far as giving you guidance is that, and I think I said this back in October, I really don't like the fact that the eave, so not the eave, sorry, the ridge height matches the ridge height of the original building. So a lot of these, it's true what you said about the other houses. I took a quick look at an aerial view, and yeah, a lot of them do have L's or additions to the rear. But particularly where you see this on two sides from two streets, I know it complicates construction perhaps somewhat, but I really would love the eave to be a little bit below, I misspoke, the ridge to be below the ridge of the existing structure to better differentiate it as a later addition. So that, that's my big thing. Is I understand, I live in an 18th century house that was added on in the 19th century for similar reasons. But again, it was done in, as many of them are, it's to the rear, and it's done in a way that when you're driving down the street, you really, for all intents and purposes, you still see the 18th century house. So, I really would prefer that, we preserve that kind of feel. So those are, and I think that again, the bottom line for me is always what's the historical value here, and what's the impact of the historical value. It's not a question of whether me or anyone else likes it or doesn't like it. It's not a, our aesthetic decision per se. It's does it and I think some of the changes you've made have tried to differentiate it. I think that's a positive step that is more in line with the Secretary's standards, as I'm sure you know. I think it would, but I still think it would be more subordinate if it were not quite so big, as particularly in the height area. And of course, again, the dormer. So those are my feelings. I know I look for guidance as to what could you possibly change to sway the commission. As far as and I'll have to Joe, how do you have any proposal as to how we get better clarity on some of that history that you brought up?
Well, I think, the preservation consultants, they could do some research and provide a report. They could dig into some of the archival material. There may be some at the library or whatever their resources usually are. I don't know. I've actually never undertaken that type of report, but there are people who know how to access those resources, but to give us a more detailed understanding of this particular building.
Okay.
If I could, Mr. Chair, Mr. Morgan, since you've made reference to particular documents tonight, could you get those to the planning office so that we can have those, please?
Absolutely.
That would be great. And Mr. Chair, if you could, I'm going to ask for continuance to your next meeting. And if we need longer, I'll have to let you know. But if we could have a continuance to your next meeting, you might recall that we were in here in October and then the commission didn't meet at all in December. And then the architect wasn't available in November, and then the architect wasn't available in December. So it's been a while. So if we could have a continuance to your next meeting, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. And usually we continue to a date certain. So do you want to peg it to January, January 27th and change it if you need more time? Or
yes, that would be good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So
question.
I'm sorry, someone say?
I have a hand raised.
Oh, okay, Jeffrey. Yes, I'll stop. Go ahead.
Question for Mr. Morgan. Are you suggesting that really no addition could be made to this building given a discovery process that says this building is 1700s?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Yes.
Yeah.
That's a possibility. Yes.
Well, Mr. Morgan, with all due respect, that of course isn't the law, and it isn't that's certainly not the demolition delay, and it certainly isn't the law in Massachusetts, as you probably know.
Well, it isn't the law that it's forbidden to have
I don't quite understand that comment, but I don't quite understand why there's a law about that. This is a historical commission, and we're trying to understand first and foremost the condition of the buildings that are being proposed to be altered. And yes, indeed, I think that there are situations where historical conditions and fabric would limit, if not completely prohibit alterations. It's very explicit within the ordinance that owners can be asked, persuaded, urged to look for a buyer in the case where a property is considered to be historically valuable enough to actually not be altered or to be preserved. I mean, preservation really is, I think, our goal here for buildings that are deserve historical preservation. I think that's one of our mission statements here on the commission. So I don't know what law you're talking about, but I'd like to know about it if in fact that is restricting us.
Well, no, so my point is, the commission is certainly allowed to put in place a delay for a year, right? And then if let's take a hypothetical. This is a pre-existing non-conforming lot, so the applicant has a right to seek a special permit for non-conformities if they wanted to put an addition here. If the zoning board were inclined to grant it, which of course they don't have to, it's a discretionary permit. However, if the delay were to, if the applicant did nothing to this house and didn't do anything for a year, if you impose the delay, they could then remove the house and build an exact same footprint and height home without any permits. So so the quote prohibition on doing anything to the house essentially lasts for a year.
Right.
So, that's why there are standards that if you're going to put additions on, then, one would attempt to do it within the Secretary of the Interior standards, which doesn't typically prohibit modifications to historic structures.
All right. Well, I want to try to curtail too much rabbit holing here, but I will point out one other thing I would add to this discussion is just that there may be to augment or supplement Mr. Morgan's comments, that there in the case of this particular structure, there some of that age-related veneration, if you will, might be mitigated by some of the changes that have happened to this particular structure over the years that I mentioned earlier, which might have already somewhat detracted from its historical, value, if you will.
Right.
So
I agree with that. We know that the historical commission, the Massachusetts Historical Commission, won't accept certain PRs on properties because they've been so altered that they really don't consider them to be of historical fabric, of worthy of being considered as preserved or historical. So that may be the case here, but since we don't really know, how do we proceed?
I don't disagree. I want to be really clear. I don't disagree with finding more information. I just, there was an extreme statement made, in my opinion, and I just wanted to clarify that. So we're happy to get all of this information, more information. I'd love to see what Mr. Morgan has. We will do more investigation inside the house, and we will certainly get back to you.
Okay, that's fair enough, and I appreciate that. So we were about to have a motion to continue this to the 27th of January meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. I think that was Malcolm. Okay, is that seconded?
Seconded.
Okay, thank you, Joe. So Malcolm, your vote on that? I assume this is a motion.
Sorry, yes.
Okay, Chris? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, Peter.
Yes.
Okay, Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Yeah, and so there's no, what's the word? No prejudice on that. And we'll look forward to more exposition on that. Finally, and apparently you're not done with us yet, Attorney Mead, which is not a problem. We're happy to have you. 79 State Street. Now, this is not a demo delay hearing. This is a request for a I said DOD and my brain immediately went to Department of Defense. Downtown Overlay District, DOD, advisory review. So you're asking for us to prepare an advisory review for the planning board because you need a special permit for some changes to windows at 79 State Street. And I'll just, one quick comment. This came in mid-December, and as you noted earlier, there's quite a gap there between meetings. So normally we try to get that report 30 days from when you submit everything, but I hope you're not going to expect us to have this report in like 2 days.
So, Mr. Chair, just I'll answer that in a second. Lisa Mead, Talon Costa 30 Green Street in Newburyport, on behalf of the Institution for Savings for their property at 79 State Street, With me this evening is Kim Rock, the Chief Operating Officer, and Chip Nutter, the architect. And the answer is no. The actual rule is that we are not allowed to submit to the planning board under the DOD for 30 days after we apply to the Historic Commission. So that 30-day mark is this coming Monday that we're allowed to submit, but they then have to advertise for a public hearing. So we won't have our hearing in front of the planning board probably for at least 3 or 4 weeks. So you have a few days to write a report.
Good.
So,
okay. Yeah.
Do you want me to go ahead, or did you want to say something?
I'm trying to think if we should do the since this I don't think this one is, although it's the Institution for Savings, I don't think this one is going to be anywhere near as controversial as some of the other projects that that institution has had before this committee. At least I certainly hope not. And I don't expect not, but I think I should have just a brief opportunity see if any member of the public would like to make a comment on this, and then you can go ahead.
Well, here would be my request, because I think it would be important for folks to hear what we're doing before there's public comment, because there's a note on one of the plans relative to, for instance, the trim we're replacing being replaced with composite, which is inaccurate. And so I just wonder if perhaps we could do our presentation and then you could have the public comment, just so that everybody has the most current information.
Yeah, I think that's fine, because I think the plans are complex enough, with all those windows and so forth. So yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that? That's fine with me.
Okay, thank you very much. So as the chair indicated, we're here for a demolition, the downtown overlay district review. Now you've got me doing it. DOD review from the Historic Commission, which, as the commission recalls, if you go to the first slide, Caitlin, the report is supposed to deal with the significance of the historic building or structure proposed for demolition and the relative importance of such historic building or structure within its setting of the DOD. So that's the charge from the DOD to the commission. And just to, next slide, please, just to reiterate, if all we were doing were to be replacing windows, we actually wouldn't be here. But the reason we're here is because we're actually moving a couple of the window openings. And therefore, there is some demolition of the building structure itself. It's like 2.6%, but nonetheless, that's happening. And therefore, we're here. So we're doing a little bit more than changing out windows. We are actually moving a couple of the windows, in particular on the 1980s edition. So I'll go over that in a minute. So this structure was constructed in around 1845. It was called the hang on a second here, the Dole Blumpy house, according to the Form B. The architectural style is a Greek revival style dwelling. As you can see, what we're going to show you in a minute from the Sanborn maps from 1888, continuing through 1924, it has undergone several changes. There's a 2-story L that was added in the 1900s to 1906. In 1985, a flat roof modern style addition was added adjacent to Temple Street and towards the rear of the structure as well. In 1977, a shed dormer was added. This is all according to the Form B. So if you could go to the first Sanborn map. So here is the 1888 Sanborn map, and you see right in the middle of it, the yellow dot. Here is the house at the corner of Temple and State Street, which the footprint obviously looks much different than it does today. You'll see there's no round corner on the front left side. There's no additions on the back. It was a very small house at the time. And of course, it was shadowed by the Whitefield Church. Next slide, please. And then here is the 1894 Sanborn map. It has the same form. Next slide, please. And in 1900, you see a little bump out on the back. That's the small change in 1900. Next slide, please. And then here's one of the larger changes. So we have the round room that was added on the front somewhere between the late 1888 and 1906. And there was a L added on the rear of the structure. Next slide, please. And again, here is the 1914 map, and the footprint is the same. And next slide, please. And here's the 1924 Assessors Map. Now we have a porch added beside the little round room on the front. And again, we still have that little porch off the back by the L. And we'll have the next slide, please. The Form B actually has some really great photos of this, this house. So here you see it next to the Whitefield Church, and you see it on the left. I particularly like this fence, but that's long gone. Next slide, please. And if you could just blow this up a little bit, because I want to show a few things to the commission, which will be helpful moving forward. So here you see the cover over the front entry is no longer there, but you see the windows are 2/1s. So all of the original windows were 2/1s. And then you see the round room. You can't really see the window pattern in the round room, but we're going to tell you pretty soon that right now it looks like the window pattern is 6/6 in the round room. And sometime after 1900, 1920s, maybe, when the later additions were added, all of the windows were changed out to be 6/6. The round room windows, actually, we had Chip had the window women come in because they're going to help with the restoration of those windows and the ones around the front door. They glued a 6 screen on the interior of those windows to make them appear to be 6/6. So they're actually 1/1s, which is the proposal to take them back to remove the grids that were pasted onto them. Next slide, please. So what are the changes overall? There is no change proposed to the footprint. We are proposing to replace a number of the windows. And when I show you in a minute, we are replacing all of the windows except the ones around the front door and the round room windows. And there's a small grid on the rear 1900s L in the back that we're also not changing out. The rest of the windows that we're replacing are actually, as I've just shown you, not original windows. They're the 6/6 windows, and we will be replacing those. We are also we're moving a few openings to have a better pattern of the window across the building to be more appropriate to match the traditional historic building. As I noted, that's about 2.8% demolition and infill together, which of course constitutes an alteration. And we're going to be removing the vinyl siding. The siding so far that we can tell is in really bad shape underneath. It's got lots and lots of nail holes in it, and it's just not in good shape. So it will be replaced with cedar clappers. Of the reveal, which is the reveal that is underneath, which is probably somewhere 3 3/4 to 4 inches. We're not really sure, but will match the reveal that exists on the siding underneath. Next slide, please. So I do want to clarify, this is the issue that we wanted to clarify that was on the plan. So the trim on the original building in the 1920s L will be repaired and painted. If there any needs to be replaced, it will be replaced with wood trim. The trim around the windows, once they're replaced, will have new wood trim of the same profiles. The trim on the 1980s edition will also be replaced if necessary, with new wood trim as needed. Next slide, please. So if you can go blow that up a little bit. I might also add, while Caitlin does this, the windows will be aluminum clad, wood interior, simulated divided light, muttons on the inside and outside with spacer bars. And I provided a cut sheet in the filing to the board. So as you can see, there's no changes that are going to happen to the footprint of this building, but here is the plot plan of the structure. Next slide, please. And so here's a front view. We have some better views in a minute, but here's a front view from State Street. And this, I would just want to point something out in this slide. In the upper triangle, the upper gable, all of that trim is covered with the vinyl siding. We're not really sure what the condition is, but it will either be restored or replaced with wood to match. But I think that we're going to be able to restore it, but it just hasn't been uncovered yet, but that will all be the same. Next slide, please. Here's the side elevation. Next slide, please. That's Temple Street. Rear elevation. Excuse me, this is up close on Temple Street. So you can obviously see the 1980s edition here. It doesn't take a genius to figure that out. Next slide, please.
Do you plan to keep the shutters, Attorney Mead?
No, the shutters, which are not original, obviously, the shutters are all going to be replaced with wood shutters.
Mm-hmm.
Next slide. And here's the rear of the building. You can see the 1920s L on the left-hand side there. We'll get a better shot of that in a minute. Next slide, please. And then, of course, here's coming up State Street. Next slide. And then going north on State Street. Next slide, please. So here's the existing conditions. And actually, what will be easier is if you just go to the next slide, Caitlin. And blow that up a little bit, that would be great. So what my colleague Ben has done here is highlight those windows that are being restored and repaired. So as you look at the Temple Street elevation, you can see that round room set of windows. And then on the opposite elevation, you can see again the round room set of windows. And then the front elevation, the bottom left-hand drawing, you can see that the front door, the whole front door will be repaired and restored, and both the side lights as well as the transom will be repaired and restored. Same way with the windows in the round room, which again, I'm going to tell you are going to end up being 1/1 because that's what the original windows are. And then the other bank of windows that's going to be repaired and restored is at the back of the 1920s L. You see that little bank of windows back there that will be repaired and restored. There are the only other original windows that we believe exist are a couple of basement windows on the L. So, but they're in very poor condition. Not surprising, of course, because of their location, and those will be replaced.
Quick question, Attorney Mead, pardon the interruption. In the lower left of the screen we're looking at right now, the large window to the left of the entrance, there's a gray area there. Can you tell us what's going on with that?
Yes, and if 1 second, let's go to the next slide.
Okay.
And if you can blow that bottom elevation up, you might recall on the original photograph from the 1900s, the Form B, that bay window was later added, and that's part of the infill and demolition. We're taking that bay window out and putting the 2/1s back in there.
Oh, okay, so that is based on the historical photograph that we saw a few minutes ago.
That's correct.
I see.
So it's unclear when that bay window was added on that side, but it's certainly not original. And if you don't mind, Caitlin, if you could go back up to the second photograph from the Form B. I'm not sure what slide it was. There it is. And you blow that up a little bit. There you go.
I see, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So if you could go back down to the proposed drawings, I want to highlight a couple of other things. I think that you might agree that that makes that front entry much more handsome than, and obviously than that kind of newish bay window there.
Yeah, well, certainly, yeah, architecturally more appropriate. And you know, I often wrestle with trying to bring something back. And there's, you know, it's cautionary about, quote, conjectural, but in this case, where you do have a photographic record, it's not so much, it's not conjectural really, because you do have an actual record of, you know, what was there originally. So you're restoring something to you know, something that you know is actually there, and it's not just someone's guess.
Right. So the other alteration, if you will, that we're here for, if you go in the upper left-hand corner, and again, we're not changing, other than the two windows that we just talked about in the front, we're not changing any of the other window openings on the original structure or on, well, hang on, I'm not sure about the L yet. So if you look at the top left photograph, which is the Temple Street side, we have rearranged slightly and made larger those windows that were on that 1980s edition to better have a better pattern, to better complement the original structure. In addition, we've changed slightly the location of the windows on the rear of that 1980s edition. If you can see in the opposite bottom corner on the back. And so we've changed those.
So those windows, pardon interruption again, so they appear to be, but it's hard to tell because it's small. Are they the same size as what will be on the oldest part of the structure there?
Are they the same size? I'm not, yeah, I don't know if they're the same, quite the same size or not. They look like they might be. Chip, can you answer that question to me? Are those the same size as the windows on the original structure?
Yeah, particularly on Temple Street, I'm thinking.
Hi, the windows on the proposed north elevation on the ground floor are the same size as on the original building. The ones on the second floor are also the same size as the ones on the second floor of the original building, as well as the proposed east elevation. Those will match in width and height of the windows on the original structure.
Okay, thank you very much. That answers my question.
Okay, so if you could, yeah, zoom out again. So I think that I have, if you can blow up the elevation that's the top right-hand corner, Caitlin. So you can see along that dormer, we're also changing out the windows. You can see that, as well as on the lower part of the 1977 edition. So I think that if you can back up a little bit, I mean, go to the next slide then after you are able to do that. So just to give you a couple of updates. So all of this is going to be repaired and restored. There you can see that later added bay window that's going to be put back, Mr. Chair. But all of the detail on the front of the structure will be repaired and restored. Next slide, please. Similarly, you can see the round room, those panels, everything that will just all be scraped and painted. That does not have vinyl siding on it. Next slide, please. And here you can see how the vinyl sliding, I'm not sure if you can tell this, but that whole gable at the top, all that trim is covered That will be all exposed.
Yeah, it looks like the pilasters aren't covered with vinyl, but yeah, it looks like the
Right.
triangle that you mentioned looks, you can see the seams in the applied vinyl.
Correct. Next slide, please. And just an up close of, some of the trim and work that's going to be done. Next slide. And again, just another front photo of the house more up close. So as you see, that bay window was later added. And then you can see this actually shows the 6/6 applied grids on the inside of the round room windows. It's a better shot of the door also that's going to be, repaired and restored, the side lights and the transom. Next slide, please. And then then there's the better shot of the trim, which will be repaired and restored as necessary. It's in pretty good shape though. Next slide, please.
And you said the shutters, those shutters
are-
that look like they're just screwed on. So are they going to be, you said they're going to be replaced with wooden ones, will it be a similar thing, or they try to be more, historically accurate?
Yeah, they're on the drawing. So if you could
Okay.
go up to the proposed plan. You can see them on the drawings.
Yeah, what I was asking is, so you said they'd be wooden shutters, but just screwed to the side of the building, or are they going to actually be like hung like real shutters, or just out of curiosity?
Chip, have you made that determination yet?
I was thinking that we would put them on hinges and treat them as real shutters. I don't personally like the look of screwed on shutters.
Few of us do in these parts. Okay, thank you, Chris. Charles, rather.
Okay. And then the next slide is the just a sample of the windows. You see the wood interior. There they are on a historic building. Next slide, please. And then we just have a photograph of one of them. And then we have the cut sheet as the last slide.
Yep.
So with that, we request that the commission make a recommendation or a report to the planning board concerning the historic significance of this building or structure and the relative importance of the building to the DoD.
Okay, thanks very much for your presentation, Attorney Mead. Did Mr. Nutter have anything wanted to add, or can I go ahead and talk to my fellow members here?
I don't have anything to add right now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And I think it's unlikely we'll have public comment, but I feel obliged just to have a very brief interruption to allow it if someone feels a compelling need to make a comment. So I'll officially open a public comment period, and we'll just give people a moment. And actually, I do see a hand this time. So Caitlin, can you unmute looks like Stephanie Nikitish?
Sharon Richards.
Yes, we can hear you. A little low, but we can hear you.
Thank you. So I appreciated that presentation and the level of attention being paid to that building. I want to make sure that because this will go to the planning board as a DoD special permit, that there will be a complete inventory of the windows. So, that's one of my concerns. And I was glad to hear that the window woman of New England had been consulted. So that's good. And, I do appreciate the attention to detail on the windows in this building, and that's important in the DoD and throughout Newburyport. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't want to answer for you, but I believe that you guys did do an inventory that included the condition, correct?
That is correct. And it's actually on those plans. It's a very detailed inventory. And we have a photograph of every single window.
Yeah. So I believe that is requirement of the DoD special permit process for, dealing with windows, and it looks like the applicant has complied with that from as best I can see. Okay, let me turn to, let me officially, I don't see any other hands, so I'll close the public comment period and move on to the board here. Fellow panelists, any, I guess I'll do my usual. See, who will I start with this time? How about Malcolm Carnwath? Any comments, Malcolm? What I'm looking for here is input that anything that you feel is important to include in the report that gets sent to the historical report that gets sent to the planning board.
Nothing except that it's a handsome Greek revival building.
Okay. All right, that's fine. How about Mr. Fay? Any thoughts that or anything that you want to make sure is included in the report?
No, that seemed pretty extensive to me.
Okay. Any? Okay.
I'm satisfied.
And okay, and no real concerns that you have in your mind about it? Okay.
Nope.
That's fine.
Okay.
Not looking to cause trouble here. Joe Morgan, any thoughts or concerns?
Yeah, I think it's really a shame to invest in the building and do the exterior restoration without removing the old additions, the 1980s L there, which is really ugly. And I think there's one on the rear too. It seems like the bank, if they really wanted to make a worthwhile community investment here, that they would actually put on a nice rear addition, which could, I don't know, fix some ADA problems. I suspect they've got ADA problems in this building, and could actually, I mean, they would restore, preserve the original building, return it to its original state, and then they could add a nice handsome addition, which would be per the Secretary of Interior standards. They could add that to the rear and provide public access where there's parking lot. And in other words, finish the job. Here, what they're doing is they're noodling around the edges, but they're actually not restoring the building, which is really what they should be doing, I think. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Let me just make a note here because I want to capture this. 1 second, and then we'll go to Peter. Peter, your thoughts?
I shared Joe's disdain for the 1980s section of this building, but that's probably a fairly common thought. The only question that I have about the rest, I do like everything else that's being done, being proposed. I have a question about the windows in that round room. I can't remember what Attorney Mead said relative to whether or not we have any better record of what those were originally, and whether or not it's possible that those were curved glass originally, 2/1. That's a fun little room there. I imagine that with the replacements that are currently planned, the awful combination storms come off, but it still ends up being a faceted sort of round room. So, and that may be the way it was originally designed and built and whatnot, but has that question been explored at all, whether or not that was originally curved glass?
If you could go, if I might, Mr. Chair, just to address this. So right there you go. Thank you. So I don't think that the window woman, I'm actually waiting to hear back from Chip. Chip, did the window woman, and I know her name and I just can't think of it off the top of my head.
Ms. Hardy, I believe it is.
Yeah,
Allison
did she indicate that she thought that was original glass? I know that
Yes.
she thought that, go ahead.
Those windows are original to that round room addition. They are chain and pulley windows. And she was planning to redo all the chains and the pulleys, but she's not going to be reglazing because that is curved glass. She's going to be pulling off those pasted on muntins, though.
Oh, so the existing glass.
Okay.
is curved, yeah. And then you can sort of see, it looks like the storm window, it's a little hard because the storm window is straight, but you can sort of see in that leftmost window in this
Yeah,
picture.
I'm noticing that too, yeah.
You are correct.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think that should really look great then with that being restored and fixed up.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
we were
We hope.
planning to put new storms up, but
Curved.
they only come
Yeah.
come straight.
Yeah, really. Yeah, that's what I thought.
What kind of storms? Is that on the schedule that you have on the other drawing?
Aluminum storm windows? No, they're not on the drawing.
Yeah, they do have some that are a little don't stick out quite so far, but you're probably aware that Mr. Is it Nutter that you can go with like 2 tracks instead of 3 and that sort of thing if you need the windows to be. I assume they're obviously they're operable. We talked about the chains and pulleys, so in order to maintain some of that operability and not have to be removing and replacing them on a seasonal basis and so on, they have ones that aren't quite so thick and that don't project as much. And
you're correct. The window woman had some recommendations.
Yeah. Okay.
My only comment on that would be it's a shame if those are the curved glass. That's terrific. And it would be a shame to put a dead flat plane on top of them.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's
I
all I have.
understand. Yep. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I have, and speaking for myself, they give me mixed feelings on the one hand, but at least it's a very easily reversible thing if at some future point it's possible to make them, for energy efficiency or whatever. That's always a tough one. Anyway, did I skip anyone? Let's see. Malcolm, Chris, Peter, Joe. I think I got everyone. My own thoughts have pretty much been already said. I don't think I can really add much. It's so I'll probably what I will do is not probably what I will do is set up a draft, and I think I'd like to let you guys, meaning by you guys meaning this commission, see the draft to check it out and before we formally send it on, so that that will definitely be ready for our meeting in 2 weeks. And if it's good to go, then the planning board and the applicant will have it at that time as well. Okay, and I think we're good to go on this particular item on the agenda, right?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks very much for all your participation tonight, Attorney Mead. Appreciate it, and appreciate everyone's adherence to trying to keep things on the move. And I will try to continue that theme so we can get through the rest of the items. Not too much more to go, thankfully. So we're doing. Yep. Thank you, and have a good evening. So a couple of quick things. Did you all have a chance to view or take a look at that Black History Initiative, the interpretive signs project that Jordy Vining is proposing? That was a question for my fellow board members here.
No.
Okay, yeah, I suspected that you might not have. So what I would propose is that he's looking to get the commission to vote its support for the application. He's got a CPC application. I personally think it's a good project, but I'm perfectly happy to carry this forward to our next meeting, so you have a chance to take a look at it. I'll just briefly sum it up by saying that he's been doing a lot of research on the history of the Afro-American population of Newburyport that does go back quite far in our history. Apparently, there's been a small but significant population of African Americans that lived here in the past, and there were communities of them and so on. And they want to have some interpretive signs put up. You've seen basically the same design as the ones you see today along the rail trail and so on, that just highlight some significant locations or events or things that relate to that particular past. So it's not forgotten, but has it can be remembered and made part of our historical perspective in the community. So that's what that's all about. So take a look at that. It's, you know, a few pages, and perhaps Jody will be able to come next time and address any questions you might have or talk to it. I should mention they'll probably also in 2 weeks, we'll have another one that just came in like either yesterday or this morning. So it was too late to make tonight's agenda. On the Cushing House, so the Museum of Old Newbury also has a CPC application we'll be taking a look at. Okay, moving on. We need to approve the minutes from December 16th. I hope you've had a chance to review those. I know I did, and I found them satisfactory. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make that motion to approve the minutes, Chris.
Okay.
This is Chris.
Yep. Yes, I recognize the voice. Thank you, Chris. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Malcolm, were you here?
Approve.
Well,
I approve.
okay, very good. Christopher Fay.
Yes,
Okay, Peter.
I
McNamee.
approve.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Okay, and the chair also approves. Nope, I didn't see a problem with them. I'm going to skip updates in the chair because I want to devote a few minutes to annual election of officers. First on vice chair, has anyone thought about throwing their hat into the ring to be the vice chair of the commission? And I want to repeat that this really doesn't involve necessarily any more work than you would be doing today, other than if for some reason I cannot make a scheduled meeting, the task of just running the meeting runs to the vice chair. Other than that, that's pretty much about it. And the other thing is what I do the way I operate as chair is I keep the vice chair always fully in the loop of everything that I'm working on and doing, so that if that should happen, that they need to run a meeting, they are fully aware of, you know, what's been going on behind the scenes. Does anyone want to step forward to offer themselves to be the vice chair? Oh, come on, please. Glad you saw the humor in that, Joe. Does anyone have a nomination or either self or otherwise for the chair?
I think you do a good job.
Well, thank you for that vote of confidence, Malcolm. That was
Seconded.
Malcolm, right? I see. Not wasting any time. Was that Joe? Joe, was that you seconding it? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, and I have been nominated to be chair for 2022. This election happens each year. I'm willing to do that. But you know, this is not necessarily, you know, this is not a lifetime appointment like a Supreme Court justice. So going forward, you know, this, you know, we really do need to have a vice chair. So we'll come back to this in a couple of weeks. Please do think about it. It's really not a big deal. And I hope that someone will be willing to come forward and be willing to affect that official capacity. In the meantime, we'll take a vote on whether you folks wish to have me continue as chair for this year. So Malcolm, your vote on that?
Yes.
Thank you. Christopher Fay?
Yes.
Okay. Peter McNamee?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Geez, as chair, should I abstain? Well, even if I abstain, there'd be 4 affirmative votes. So I appreciate your vote of confidence. I do thank you for that. I do my best. I try. Actually, I feel like patting myself on the back because here it's not even 10 o'clock, and Caitlin and I were worried about running to 11 tonight with this agenda. So we did manage to run it a tight ship tonight, and I'm very happy with that. Of course, it helped a lot that a lot of the projects were not super controversial. So you guys did a great job. I appreciate your comments. Joe, appreciate your research on the the Plum Street property, and as always, you know, some insightful comments there. always appreciate the work that you guys do. You know, it's a volunteer job. It's much appreciated. Well, you probably saw that there was a letter that I had published in the Daily News looking for additional members. So hopefully we'll find some fellow preservation-minded citizens who are willing to come forward and join us in this little adventure of ours here, trying to preserve the historical values of our lovely and historic city. So the chair is willing to hear a motion to adjourn, if there is one. I guess you want to hang around a while.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm and Chris. So Malcolm, your vote to adjourn is?
Yes, vote to adjourn.
Okay, Mr. Fay?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. McNamee?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Morgan?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and the chair is happy to adjourn as well. So thank you very much for your services tonight and for 2021. Look forward to a fruitful year this year, and we'll see what comes our way. And with that, I'll bid you Happy New Year and good night.
Good night,
Thank
everybody.
you, Chair Richards.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Good
Thank
night,
you,
everybody.
everyone. Good night.
Good night.